Can we all walk in? So I'm going to get everybody in behind us. Okay. Before we go down to the dig, I just want to talk to you very briefly about this really useful illustration. This illustration is based on a whole series of detailed written descriptions from the year 1275. And it gives you a very good idea of the city and the castle would have looked like in the 13th century. So here is the 13th century version of Dublin Castle. They began building this in 1204, and it took them 30 years to build the four great towers, build the curtain walls, linking them, the security walls, and dig out the moat around the tower. Now the curtain walls were around 15 metres high, the moat itself was 15 to 20 metres wide, 5 to 10 metres deep, and it was filled from a little river that flowed into the back here, called the River Puddle. It's a great name for a river, isn't it? The Puddle. And the puddle puddled in, puddled around the moat, and then puddled out to fill this lake, which used to be just behind the chapel. And that lake gave Dublin its name. It was known in the Irish language for centuries before the Vikings arrived as the Dublin. Duv in Irish means black, Lin means pool. Dublin, the black pool. When the Vikings arrived, they called their settlement and their city that grew around it after the lake Dublin, and the name stuck. When the English arrived, they kept the name, but they couldn't pronounce it. So in no time at all, they had battered Dublin into Dublin. And that's where it came from. It's a mispronunciation of the original name. Now you'll notice Dublin in the 13th century is a walled city. You have a wall all the way around it. The wall was around 5 metres high, and you had 5 separate entrances, manned day and night by heavily armed guards. Inside the city wall, it was a small area, about 45 acres, that's roughly 19 hectares. But inside that wall, you had about 30,000 people. And they lived in pretty poor conditions in these very small, thatched, mud-walled huts. There was no sewage facilities, there was no refuse collection, the roads were made of mud, and it absolutely stank. But you paid huge taxes to live inside the city wall. And the reason for that is that in the 13th and the 14th and the 15th centuries, Dublin was essentially an English settlement in Ireland. And the people living inside the protection of the city walls were either English settlers or else Irish people who'd anglicised. That is, they spoke English and accepted English rule. And the Irish outside hated them for it. And on a regular basis, the great tribes, the O'Borns, the O'Tooles, would come swarming down from the mountains, launch savage attacks on the city wall, pillage the farmland all around, and try to take the city back from the English. And to protect you inside, from the Irish outside, you had hundreds of heavily armed, well-equipped soldiers attached to the castle. You had the fortress into which you could flee when things got really dangerous, and you had this great security wall right around the castle. And they are the massive things that your massive taxes paid for. A high level of protection inside to protect you from the Irish outside who wanted to kill you. Now before we go downstairs, a couple of landmarks you may know. There's Christchurch Cathedral just across the road, literally 3 minutes walk away. It still looks very like that. There's St. Patrick's Cathedral, 5 minutes to the west of us. It still looks very like that, but it now has a 15th century tower on the end. You'll notice though that St. Pat's is outside the city wall, and that is because they wouldn't pay their taxes. Let's go downstairs. Can you turn that light off?
Yes.
Thanks.